mountain lion's scream split the dawn air like a knife through silk, and Delilah Emerson knew in that instant she might die before the California sun fully rose over her small ranch outside Hangtown. It was June of 1873, and she had been up before first light to check on the new lambs her ewes had birthed just days earlier. The morning air still held the cool kiss of night, though she knew by noon the heat would turn the earth to dust and make every breath feel like swallowing sand. She had grabbed her father's old rifle from beside the door, a habit she had developed in the 3 years since his death had left her alone on this hard-scrabble piece of land. The weight of it felt familiar in her hands now, though she still remembered how heavy it had seemed that first terrible morning when she realized there was no one else to carry it. The lambs were huddled against their mothers in the small pen she had built near the barn, their woolly bodies soft and vulnerable in the gray pre-dawn light. She had been counting them, making sure all 6 were accounted for, when she heard the low bleating of panic. The ewes had smelled it before she saw it, that tawny shadow moving along the fence line with liquid grace and deadly intent. The mountain lion was massive, easily over 150 pounds of pure muscle and hunger. Its golden eyes fixed on the lambs with single-minded purpose, and Delilah felt her heart slam against her ribs like a wild thing trying to escape. She raised the rifle with shaking hands, knowing she had to make the shot count because there would be no second chance. Her father had taught her to shoot when she was 12, back when her mother was still alive, and the ranch had seemed like paradise instead of the prison of hard work and loneliness it had become. The cat gathered itself to spring, muscles bunching beneath its sleek coat, and Delilah squeezed the trigger. The rifle misfired with a hollow click that seemed to echo across the empty land. Terror flooded through her veins like ice water as the mountain lion launched itself toward the pen, toward her lambs, toward everything she had worked so hard to keep alive. She was fumbling with the rifle, trying desperately to chamber another round, when the shot rang out from somewhere behind her. The sound was clean and sharp, and the mountain lion jerked in midair, its trajectory altered by the force of the bullet that caught it in the chest. It hit the ground hard, twitched once, and lay still. Delilah spun around, her hands still trembling, her breath coming in ragged gasps. A man sat astride a paint horse not 20 feet away, a rifle still raised to his shoulder. He lowered it slowly, and she could see the smoke curling from the barrel in the growing light. He was tall, even sitting down, with dark hair that curled slightly beneath the brim of his worn hat, and eyes that were the color of whiskey in sunlight. "You all right, miss?" His voice was deep and rough, like gravel under wagon wheels, but there was genuine concern in it. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak yet. Her whole body was shaking now that the danger had passed, the adrenaline draining away and leaving her weak. He dismounted in one smooth motion and walked over to the dead mountain lion, nudging it with his boot to make sure it was truly gone. Then he turned to look at her properly, and she saw that he was younger than she had first thought, maybe 25 or 26, with a strong jaw shadowed by a few days of stubble and a mouth that looked like it knew how to smile even though it was not smiling now. "Rifle misfired?" he asked, nodding toward the gun still clutched in her white-knuckled grip. "Yes." She finally found her voice, though it came out shakier than she would have liked. "I cleaned it just last week. I do not understand. Sometimes the firing pin gets worn down," he said, reaching out slowly like he was approaching a spooked horse. "May I?" She hesitated for a moment, then handed him the rifle. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and she felt a jolt of something that had nothing to do with fear run through her. He examined the weapon with practiced ease, and she found herself studying him in turn. He wore clothes that had seen hard-use dusty jeans, a dark shirt with the sleeves rolled up to reveal tanned forearms, a vest that had been good quality once but was worn at the edges now. There was a Colt revolver on his hip and a knife in his boot, and she noticed that his hands, though gentle with her rifle, had the scarred knuckles of a man who had fought more than once. "Firing pin is cracked," he said after a moment. "You're lucky it fired at all last time you used it. You have a gunsmith in town who can fix it?" "In Hangtown, yes. I was planning to go in tomorrow for supplies anyway." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware that she was standing in her work dress with her dark hair falling loose from its braid and no shoes on her feet. "Thank you for shooting it. If you had not been here—" "But I was here," he interrupted gently, "and your lambs are safe. That is what matters." She looked over at the pen where the ewes were settling down now, the lambs nursing greedily as if nothing had happened. "Yes, yes, they are." She turned back to him and really looked at him for the first time, meeting those amber eyes straight on. "I am Delilah Emerson. This is my land." "Russell Ridley!" He touched the brim of his hat in a gesture that seemed old-fashioned even for 1873. "I am looking for work, riding through to see what I can find. I did not mean to trespass on your property, but I saw the cat and thought I had better see what it was hunting." "You are looking for ranch work?" She heard the note of hope in her own voice and tried to temper it. She could not afford to hire anyone, not really, not with the way her savings had dwindled over the past year. But having someone else here, someone strong and capable who could shoot straight and was not afraid of hard work, it was tempting in a way that made her chest ache. "Any kind of work," Russell said. "I am good with horses, cattle, sheep, can mend fences, fix roofs, whatever needs doing. I do not need much, just food and a place to sleep and fair wages." She bit her lip, calculating quickly in her head. The lambs would be ready to sell in another few months. If she could just hold on until then, she would have enough to pay him something. And there was so much that needed doing. So much that she had been putting off because she could not manage it alone. "I cannot pay much," she said honestly. "Maybe $10 a month to start, plus meals and the use of the old hand's cabin out back. It is not fancy, but it is clean, and the roof does not leak. If things go well with the lamb sales this fall, I could pay more." She watched his face, expecting him to refuse. $10 a month was insultingly low, and they both knew it. A good ranch hand could make $40 or $50 a month, with room and board. But Russell just nodded slowly. "That sounds fair. When would you want me to start?" "You mean you will take it?" She could not keep the surprise from her voice. A hint of a smile touched his mouth, transforming his serious face into something almost beautiful. "I mean, I will take it. Truth is, Miss Emerson, I'm about down to my last dollar and my horse could use a rest. And you look like you could use the help." She should have been offended by that last part, by the implication that she could not manage on her own, but she was too tired and too grateful and too aware of how close she had just come to losing everything to take offense. "Delilah," she said. "Just Delilah, and yes, I could use the help. Then I guess I'm hired." He held out his hand, and after a moment, she took it. His palm was calloused and warm, his grip firm but not crushing. "Should I see to my horse, and then you can show me what needs doing first?" "Yes, the stable is over there." She pointed to the weathered structure that leaned slightly to the left. "There is hay in the loft and grain in the barrel. Help yourself." "Thank you." He started to turn away, then paused. "Delilah, you should probably do something about that mountain lion. The carcass will draw scavengers." She looked at the dead cat, at the magnificent animal that had been trying so hard to survive that it had risked coming this close to human habitation. "I know. I will drag it out past the property line. Let the coyotes and buzzards have it." "That is a lot of weight to drag," Russell said carefully. "How about I do that while you get breakfast started? I have been riding since before midnight and I could eat just about anything that does not move." She wanted to refuse, to prove that she could handle it herself. But that was pride talking, and pride was a luxury she could not afford. "That would be helpful. Thank you." She watched him lead his horse toward the stable, moving with the loose-limbed grace of a man who had spent most of his life in the saddle. Then she turned and walked back toward the small house that had been her entire world for the past 3 years, her bare feet leaving dark prints in the dew-wet grass. Inside, she stirred up the fire in the cook stove and set about making breakfast. She had eggs from her chickens, bacon that she had traded for with the Johnsons down the valley, and fresh bread that she had baked yesterday. It was more food than she usually allowed herself for breakfast, but she was feeding a working man now, and working men needed fuel. Her hands moved automatically through the familiar motions of cooking, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept seeing Russell Ridley, as he had looked sitting on that paint horse with his rifle raised, calm and steady in the face of danger. She kept feeling the warmth of his hand in hers and the way his eyes had softened when he looked at her. She shook her head sharply. This was foolishness. He was a drifter looking for work, nothing more. He would stay until something better came along or until she could not afford to pay him anymore, and then he would move on. Men like that always did. Her father had told her stories about cowboys and ranch hands who blew through like tumbleweeds, never staying long enough to put down roots or form attachments. But when Russell knocked on the door 20 minutes later, cleaned up and with his hair still damp from the pump, she felt that strange flutter in her chest again. She told herself it was just gratitude, just relief at not being alone anymore. She told herself it meant nothing. She told herself a lot of things that morning that she would later realize were lies. They ate breakfast in the kitchen, sitting across from each other at the scarred wooden table that had belonged to her grandparents. Russell did not talk much, but he was not sullen or uncomfortable with the silence. He just seemed to be a man who thought before he spoke, who did not waste words on things that did not need saying. "This is good," he said after a while, nodding at the food. "Best meal I have had in weeks. It is just eggs and bacon." But she felt pleased anyway, warmed by the simple compliment. "Maybe, but it is cooked right and served with care. That counts for something." He took another bite, then asked, "How long have you been running this place alone?" 3 years. My father died in the spring of 1870. Pneumonia. My mother had already been gone 2 years before that. Fever. She said it matter-of-factly, the way she had learned to speak of loss. If she let emotion into it, the grief would swallow her whole. "That is young to be on your own." There was no pity in his voice, just observation. "I am 22, she said a little defensively. "Old enough to manage." "I did not say you were not. You have clearly done a fine job. I just meant it must be hard." He met her eyes across the table. "I know what it is like to be alone." There was something in the way he said it that made her think he was not just talking about physical solitude. But before she could ask, he pushed back from the table and stood. "What do you want me to start on today?" She took him around the property, pointing out everything that needed attention. The list was long and overwhelming: the stable roof that leaked in the corner, the fence line that needed mending, the well that was starting to pull up muddy water, the vegetable garden that was being overrun by weeds because she had not had time to tend it properly. Russell listened to it all without comment, his eyes taking in every detail. When she finally ran out of things to show him, he nodded once. "I will start with the well. If the water goes bad, nothing else matters. Then the stable roof before the next rain. After that, we can work on the fences together. 2 people can do it faster than 1. "I was not expecting you to do all of it yourself," she said quickly. "I can help with most things." "I know you can. I have seen your hands." He said it without looking at her, his gaze on the well. "But some jobs go faster with 2 people, and some are easier with height and weight. We will figure out which is which as we go." She realized he was right about her hands. They were work-roughened and scarred, the hands of someone who had been doing hard labor for years. She had stopped being self-conscious about them a long time ago, but something about the way he had noticed, the matter-of-fact acknowledgement of her work, made her feel seen in a way she had not felt since her father died. They fell into a routine over the next few days that felt surprisingly natural. Russell worked from sunup to sundown, tackling the endless list of repairs with steady determination. Delilah kept up with her usual chores, milking the cow, feeding the chickens, tending the sheep, and working in the garden. They ate breakfast and dinner together, and she started packing him a lunch to take out to whatever corner of the property he was working on. He fixed the well first, climbing down into the cool darkness and coming back up covered in mud, but with the problem solved. Then he patched the stable roof, replacing the rotted boards with lumber he found stacked in the barn. He mended the fence line, walking every inch of the property to find the weak spots and shore them up. He was meticulous and thorough, and she found herself grateful beyond words for his presence. But it was not just the work he did that mattered. It was the way the ranch felt different with him there, less lonely, less desperate. She found herself looking forward to meals, to the quiet conversation they shared over coffee in the evenings. He told her about growing up in Texas, about losing his family to cholera when he was 16, about the years he had spent drifting from place to place looking for something he could not quite name. She told him about her childhood here on the ranch, about her mother, who had loved to sing while she worked, about her father, who had taught her everything he knew about raising sheep. She told him things she had not spoken aloud in years, and he listened with an attention that made her feel like her words mattered. One evening, about 2 weeks after he had arrived, they were sitting on the porch watching the sun set over the hills. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink and purple, and the air had finally cooled enough to be pleasant. Russell was whittling a piece of wood, his hands moving with practiced ease, and she was mending a tear in one of her work dresses. "Do you ever think about leaving?" he asked suddenly, "selling this place and moving somewhere easier?" She was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. "Sometimes, when things are hard, when I am so tired I can barely stand, when I look at the ledger and see how little money is left. But then I think about my parents, about how hard they worked to build this place, and I cannot do it. This is their legacy. It is all I have left of them." "It is not all you have," Russell said softly. "You have their strength, their determination. That is in you, not in the land." She looked over at him, surprised by the words. His eyes were on the sunset, his profile sharp against the fading light. "That is a kind thing to say. It is a true thing to say." He turned to meet her gaze, and something passed between them in that moment, something electric and undeniable. "You are one of the strongest people I have ever met, Delilah Emerson." She felt heat rise to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the warm evening air. "You barely know me." "I know enough." He went back to his whittling, but there was a slight smile on his lips. "I know you get up before dawn every day and work until you can barely stand. I know you are kind to your animals and honest in your dealings. I know you took a chance on hiring a stranger when you could barely afford to. That tells me plenty." She did not know what to say to that, so she said nothing. But she felt something shift inside her, something that had been locked away for a long time starting to cautiously open. The next morning she woke to find that one of the ewes had gotten out of the pen and wandered off. She discovered it just after dawn when she went to check on the flock and found a gap in the fence where the boards had been loose. Panic seized her. The ewe was one of her best, a strong breeder who had given her healthy lambs for 3 years running. Russell was already up and working on the stable door when she ran to him, breathless and frightened. "One of the ewes got out. I do not know how long she has been gone. There are coyotes in the hills and mountain lions. Easy." He set down his tools and put his hands on her shoulders, steadying her. "We will find her. Which direction do the tracks lead?" She had not even thought to look for tracks, but Russell did, kneeling down by the gap in the fence and studying the ground with a tracker's eye. He followed the prints across the yard and into the scrub brush that led up into the foothills. "She went this way. Come on." He went to get his horse, then paused. "Do you ride?" "Yes, but I do not have a saddle horse, just the old draft mare." "You can ride with me. It will be faster." She hesitated only a second before nodding. He mounted first, then reached down and pulled her up behind him with an ease that spoke of strength. She had no choice but to wrap her arms around his waist, and she tried not to notice how solid he felt, how warm. They rode up into the hills following the tracks, Russell reading the signs in the dust and broken vegetation with an expertise that impressed her. The morning sun climbed higher, and the heat began to build. She could feel sweat soaking through her dress where it pressed against him, and she wondered if he could feel it too. They found the ewe in a small canyon about an hour later. She had gotten tangled in some brush and was bleeding pitifully, exhausted from her efforts to free herself. Russell dismounted and helped Delilah down. Then together they approached the frightened animal. "Easy, girl," Delilah murmured, using the voice that had always calmed the sheep. "We are here now. We are going to help you." Russell pulled out his knife and carefully cut away the branches that had trapped her. The ewe struggled at first, but Delilah kept talking to her in that low, soothing voice, and gradually the animal calmed. When she was finally free, Delilah ran her hands over the ewe's body, checking for injuries. "She seems all right, just scared and tired." She looked up at Russell with relief shining in her eyes. "Thank you. I could not have found her alone." "You would have managed," he said, but there was warmth in his voice. "You always do." They started the walk back, Russell leading the horse while Delilah led the ewe. The sun was high and merciless now, and she could feel it beating down on her head and shoulders. She had forgotten her hat in her panic, and she knew she would pay for it later with a sunburn. As if reading her thoughts, Russell pulled off his own hat and held it out to her. "Here, put this on. But then you will not have any shade." "I have had plenty of sun in my life. A little more will not kill me. Take it." She took the hat, touched by the gesture. It was too big for her and smelled like leather and sweat and something indefinably masculine that made her pulse quicken. She settled it on her head and saw him smile, just a little. "Looks good on you. I must look ridiculous. You look like a woman who belongs out here, like you are part of this land." He said it simply, as if it were obvious fact. They walked in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the crunch of their footsteps and the occasional bleat from the ewe. Then Russell spoke again. "I have been thinking about that fence. The boards were not just loose, they were rotted through in spots. I should replace that whole section, not just patch it." "That will take more lumber. I'm not sure I can afford—" "There is enough lumber in the barn. Your father must have stockpiled it. I found it yesterday when I was looking for something else. It has been there a while, but it is still good. I can use that." She felt a wave of emotion that took her by surprise. Of course, her father would have stockpiled lumber. He had always been thinking ahead, always preparing for the next repair or project. It was one more small way he was still taking care of her, even 3 years after his death. "That would be good," she managed to say around the tightness in her throat. "Thank you for checking." When they got back to the ranch, Russell helped her get the ewes settled back in the pen, then set about immediately replacing the fence section so it would not happen again. Delilah went inside to start preparing dinner, but she found herself watching him through the kitchen window as she worked. He had taken off his vest in the heat, and she could see the way his muscles moved beneath his shirt as he worked. There was something almost hypnotic about watching him, about the steady rhythm of his labor. He was not a large man, but he was strong and capable, and there was a grace to his movements that spoke of years of practice. She realized with a start that she was attracted to him, not just grateful for his help, not just appreciative of his company, but genuinely attracted to him in a way that made her skin feel too tight and her breath come too fast. It had been so long since she had felt anything like this that at first she did not even recognize it for what it was. The realization frightened her. This was dangerous territory. He was her employee, and more than that, he was temporary. He had made no promises to stay, and she had no reason to think he would. Getting attached to him would only lead to heartbreak when he inevitably left. But knowing that and stopping it from happening were two different things. That night at dinner, she was hyper-aware of everything about him, the way he moved, the sound of his voice, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. She caught herself staring and looked away quickly, hoping he had not noticed. But he had noticed. She saw it in the way he looked at her, in the slight pause before he spoke. "Delilah, is everything all right?" "Yes, fine. Just tired." She busied herself with clearing the dishes, keeping her hands occupied so she would not do something foolish like reach across the table to touch him. He did not push, but she could feel him watching her with concern. When the dishes were done, he stood and moved toward the door. "I should let you get some rest. It has been a long day." "Russell?" She had not meant to say his name, but it came out before she could stop it. He turned back, waiting. Thank you for today, for everything you have done. I know I do not say it enough, but I am grateful. Something softened in his expression. You do not need to thank me. I am just doing my job. It is more than that. She took a step toward him, not sure what she was doing, but unable to stop herself. You have made this place feel like a home again, instead of just a burden. He was very still, his eyes searching her face. Delilah. Whatever he was going to say was interrupted by the sound of horses approaching fast. They both tensed, and Russell's hand went automatically to the gun on his hip. Riders arriving after dark was rarely a good sign. Delilah moved to the window and peered out into the twilight. She could see 3 horses and 3 men, and even from a distance she recognized the lead rider's bulky frame. It is Ed Sutton, she said, her stomach sinking. Who is Ed Sutton? Russell moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat coming off his body. He owns the big ranch to the east, about 5,000 acres. He has been trying to buy my land for the past year. She swallowed hard. He does not take no for an answer very well. Russell's jaw tightened. Stay behind me. They went out onto the porch together, and she saw Ed Sutton rein in his horse a few feet away. He was a big man in his late 40s, running to fat now, but still powerful. His face was florid from too much whiskey, and his eyes were small and mean beneath bushy brows. The 2 men with him were his hired hands, tough-looking characters who wore their guns like they knew how to use them. Miss Emerson? Sutton touched his hat in a mockery of politeness. I see you have hired some help. What do you want, Sutton? She kept her voice level despite the fear curling in her gut. Just being neighborly. Thought I would check in, see how you are managing. Heard you had some trouble with a mountain lion the other day. The trouble was dealt with. So I see. His eyes flicked to Russell, assessing. You one of her ranch hands? I am. Russell's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. And Miss Emerson already said the trouble was dealt with. So unless you have other business, I would suggest you move along. It is getting late. Sutton's face darkened. I was not talking to you, boy. I was talking to the lady. The lady does not want to talk to you, Delilah said before Russell could respond. And I have told you before, Sutton, my land is not for sale. Not to you, not to anyone. That is foolish, girl. You cannot manage this place alone. Sooner or later you are going to fail, and then I will buy it from the bank for pennies on the dollar. Might as well sell to me now and get a fair price. I said no. She could feel anger rising to replace the fear. Now get off my property. Sutton leaned forward in his saddle, his expression ugly. You are making a mistake. A woman alone out here, accidents can happen. Would be a shame if something happened to your livestock, or your buildings, or you. Russell moved so fast she barely saw it. One moment he was standing beside her on the porch. The next he was standing by Sutton's horse with his hand on the man's saddle, his eyes blazing. That sounded an awful lot like a threat, he said softly. And I do not take kindly to threats against people I care about. So here is what is going to happen. You are going to turn that horse around and ride off this property, and you are not going to come back, because if you do, if anything happens to Miss Emerson or her animals or anything on this ranch, I am going to assume it was you, and I will come looking for you. Do we understand each other? Sutton's face went purple with rage, but something in Russell's eyes made him hesitate. This was not a man who made empty threats. This was a man who had killed before and would do it again if necessary. You're making a mistake, boy, Sutton finally said, but he was already gathering his reins, already signaling his men to turn around. No, Russell said. You made the mistake by coming here. Do not make another one. They watched the 3 riders disappear into the darkness, and only when the sound of hoofbeats had faded completely did Russell relax. He turned to Delilah and saw that she was shaking. Are you all right? He has never been that direct before. He has always been subtle about it, making offers and implying things, but tonight... She wrapped her arms around herself. I think he really meant it. He meant it. Russell guided her back inside the house, his hand gentle on her elbow. But he is also a coward. Men like that usually are. They rely on intimidation. But when someone stands up to them, they back down. You should not have done that, she said, even though she was grateful he had. He is powerful in this area. He could make trouble for you. Let him try. There was a hardness in Russell's voice that reminded her that this man, for all his gentleness with her, was dangerous when he needed to be. I meant what I said. I am not going to let anyone hurt you. She looked up at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth in his eyes. He meant it. This man who had known her for only a few weeks was willing to stand between her and danger, to risk his own safety for hers. Why? She whispered. Why do you care what happens to me? He was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. Then he reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. Because somewhere between shooting that mountain lion and now you stopped being just my employer, he said softly, and I stopped being just your hired hand, and I think you know that as well as I do. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. Russell, you do not have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. I wanted you to understand why I'm not going anywhere, why I'm going to stay and help you fight whatever comes. Not because you pay me, but because— He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. Because I am falling for you, Delilah. And I think I have been since the first moment I saw you standing there in the dawn with that rifle in your hands, brave and scared and absolutely beautiful. She could not breathe, could not think, could only feel the warmth of his hand on her face and the intensity of his gaze. I am falling for you too, she whispered. I have been trying not to, trying to tell myself it was just gratitude or loneliness or anything else, but it is not. It is you. It has been you since the beginning. He made a sound low in his throat, and then he was kissing her. His lips were gentle at first, questioning, giving her every chance to pull away, but she did not pull away. She leaned into him, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders, kissing him back with all the loneliness and longing she had been holding inside for so long. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. Russell rested his forehead against hers, his hands cupping her face like she was something precious. I know this is complicated, he said. I know I am just a drifter with nothing to offer you but hard work and a questionable past. But I swear to you, Delilah, if you will give me a chance, I will spend every day trying to be worthy of you. You are already worthy, she said fiercely. You are the best man I have ever known. And yes, this is complicated, and yes, I am probably making a huge mistake, but I do not care. I do not want to be careful anymore. I do not want to be alone anymore. I want this. I want you. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and she felt something inside her that had been frozen for 3 years finally thaw. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with emotion. We should probably take this slow, he said. Though his hands were still on her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbone, we should probably be sensible and careful. Probably, she agreed. But she was smiling, and so was he. Tomorrow, he said. We can be sensible tomorrow. Tonight I just want to hold you and know that this is real. So they sat together on the old sofa that had been her parents', wrapped in each other's arms, talking softly about everything and nothing. He told her about the places he had been, the things he had seen. She told him about her dreams for the ranch, the improvements she wanted to make if she could just hold on long enough. They talked until the fire burned low, and the night grew deep around them, and when Russell finally stood to leave, it felt like tearing apart something that was meant to be whole. I do not want you to go, she admitted, but I know you should. I do not want to go either, but you are right. He kissed her softly. Lock the door behind me. And if you hear anything strange, anything at all, you fire that shotgun I saw by your bed, and I will come running. Russell? What you said before about having a questionable past, I do not care what you did before you came here. All I care about is who you are now." His expression softened. "Thank you for that. But you should know I have done things I'm not proud of. I have been in fights, some of them deadly. I have broken the law a few times when I thought the law was wrong. I am not a bad man, but I am not a saint either." "I did not ask for a saint. I just asked for you." He smiled at that, a real smile that transformed his whole face. "Then you have me, for as long as you want me." "Forever," she said before she could stop herself. "I want you forever." "Then forever is what you will get." He kissed her one more time, then disappeared into the night, leaving her standing in the doorway with her heart full and her mind spinning. She locked the door as he had asked and went to bed, but sleep was a long time coming. She kept replaying the evening in her mind, the fear when Sutton had threatened her, the way Russell had stood up for her, and most of all, that kiss. Her first real kiss. Because the fumbling attempts boys had made when she was younger did not count. She touched her lips, still feeling the warmth of his mouth on hers. She was 22 years old and had never really been in love before. She had thought she might never experience it, might spend her whole life alone on this ranch with nothing but her animals for company. But now everything had changed. Now there was Russell, and the future suddenly seemed full of possibilities instead of just endless work and struggle. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity and emotion. They worked side by side during the day, fixing everything that needed fixing and tending to the endless demands of the ranch. And in the evenings after the work was done, they sat together and talked, learning each other's histories and dreams. Sometimes they kissed, sweet stolen moments that never went further than they should because Russell was determined to be respectful and she was still learning to trust this new thing between them. But the tension with Ed Sutton was building. Twice more he rode past the property, always with his men, always watching with those cold, calculating eyes. Once she found a section of fence torn down, though whether it was deliberate or just bad luck she could not say. Another time, 3 of her chickens went missing, and she discovered feathers scattered near the property line. Russell said nothing, but she saw the way his jaw tightened, the way his hand never strayed far from his gun when he was outside. He was waiting for something, she realized, waiting for Sutton to make a real move. It came on a hot afternoon in late July. She and Russell were working in the garden, pulling weeds and checking the vegetables, when they heard the sound of many horses approaching. Too many horses. They looked up to see Ed Sutton riding toward them with 8 men, all armed. It was not a social visit. This was a show of force. Russell stood slowly, positioning himself between Delilah and the approaching riders. His hand rested casually on his gun, but there was nothing casual about the look in his eyes. "I thought I told you not to come back," he said when Sutton was close enough to hear. "This is not your land, boy," Sutton said. "I have business with Miss Emerson." "Then you can state your business and leave," Delilah said, coming to stand beside Russell despite his attempt to keep her behind him. "But you are not welcome here, Sutton. You have made that clear with your little accidents." "I do not know what you are talking about," but his smirk said otherwise. "I am here to make you one final offer. $500 for this property. That is more than fair considering how much you owe in back taxes." She felt like she had been punched in the stomach. "How do you know about my taxes?" "I make it my business to know things. You are 3 months behind on your payments. Another month and the county will seize this land. I am offering you a way out." "I will pay the taxes," she said, though her mind was racing. She had known they were coming due, but she had not realized she was already behind. How could she have lost track like that? "With what? You barely have 2 pennies to rub together. You cannot even afford to pay your hired man a decent wage." Sutton's eyes flicked to Russell with contempt. "Take the offer, girl. It is the only one you are going to get." "No." Her voice was shaking but firm. "I will find the money. I will pay the taxes, but I am not selling to you." "Then you are a fool. Sutton gathered his reins. When you lose this place to the county, I will be first in line to buy it, and I will get it for a fraction of what I'm offering now. You're only hurting yourself by being stubborn. They watched him ride away, and Delilah felt despair settle over her like a heavy blanket. Russell turned to her, his eyes full of concern. How much do you owe? $60. I thought I had until September, but if he is right and I'm already 3 months behind. She shook her head. I do not have $60. I barely have 20. What about the lambs? Can you sell them early? Not for another month at least, and even then I would only get maybe $40 for the lot. It is not enough. She felt tears burning behind her eyes but refused to let them fall. He is going to win. After everything, he is going to win. No, he is not. Russell took her hands in his. How much do I have saved up from my wages? That is about 3 months at $10 a month, $30. With my 20, that is still only 50. And I cannot take your wages, Russell. That is not fair. Fair has nothing to do with it. This is about keeping your home. He was quiet for a moment, thinking. I have some money saved from before. Not much, but maybe another $15. That would be enough. She stared at him. You would give me all your savings? Without hesitation. This place matters to you, which means it matters to me. He squeezed her hands gently. We are in this together, Delilah. I told you that. But if I cannot sell the lambs for enough to pay you back, then we will figure something else out. Maybe I can do some work for other ranchers, bring in extra money. Maybe we can sell something else. But we are not giving up, and we are definitely not letting Ed Sutton win. She could not hold back the tears anymore. They spilled down her cheeks, and Russell pulled her into his arms, holding her, while she cried out all the fear and frustration and exhaustion of the past 3 years. When she finally pulled back, she felt emptied out, but also strangely lighter. Thank you, she whispered. I do not know how I would survive without you. You would survive just fine. You are the strongest person I know, but you do not have to do it alone anymore. He wiped the tears from her cheeks with his thumbs. We will go into Hangtown tomorrow and pay the taxes. Together. The next morning they hitched up the draft mare to the old wagon and made the journey into town. Hangtown had been a booming mining settlement during the gold rush, but by 1873 it had settled into a quieter existence as a supply hub for the surrounding ranches and farms. The main street was lined with false-fronted buildings, and even at mid-morning the saloons were doing steady business. They went first to the county office, a small building near the center of town. The clerk, a thin man with spectacles and ink-stained fingers, looked up as they entered. Help you? I need to pay my property taxes, Delilah said, for the Emerson Ranch. The clerk consulted his ledger, running his finger down the page. Ah, yes. You are 4 months behind. That will be $80, including the late fees. 80? Delilah felt her heart sink. I was told 60. That was before the late fees. You are now 2 weeks past the final deadline. Another week and we start seizure proceedings. He peered at her over his spectacles. Can you pay? She looked at Russell, panic in her eyes. They had $65 between them. It was not enough. Russell leaned forward, his voice reasonable. Sir, Miss Emerson was not aware that the payment was so overdue. She has been managing the ranch alone and must have gotten the dates confused. Is there any way the late fees could be waived just this once? The fees are policy. I cannot waive them. But there was something in the clerk's face, a flicker of sympathy. However, I could give you until the end of the week to come up with the full amount. That is the best I can do. Thank you, Delilah said. We will have it by then. Outside, she turned to Russell. How? How are we going to get another $15 in a week? I do not know yet, but we will figure it out. He took her hand as they walked back toward the wagon. Let us take care of the other business we need to do in town. Maybe something will come to us. They went to the gunsmith first to have her rifle repaired. The gunsmith, a grizzled old man named Caleb Thompson, took one look at the broken firing pin and shook his head. I can fix this, but it will take a few days, and it will cost you $3. $3? Delilah felt panic rising again. That is fair, Russell said quietly. We will pick it up at the end of the week when we come back. After leaving the gunsmith, they stopped at the general store for supplies. Delilah was carefully counting out coins for flour and sugar when a woman's voice spoke behind her. Delilah Emerson, is that really you? She turned to see Margaret Chen, the daughter of the family that ran the laundry. They had been friends as children before Delilah's mother died, and she had stopped coming to town regularly. Margaret, it is good to see you. And you. Margaret's eyes flicked to Russell with obvious curiosity. I heard you had hired some help. The rumors do not do him justice. Russell touched his hat politely, and Delilah felt herself blushing. Margaret, this is Russell Ridley. Russell, Margaret Chen. Pleased to meet you, madam. And you. Margaret turned back to Delilah. Listen, I am glad I ran into you. I have been meaning to ride out to your place. I have a business proposition for you. A proposition? My mother is getting older and she cannot handle all the laundry work anymore. We need someone to help with washing the linens from the hotel and some of the bigger ranches. It is hard work, but it pays well. 25 cents per load, and we can usually provide 4 or 5 loads a week. Would you be interested? Delilah's mind was racing. 25 cents a load, 5 loads a week, that was over $1 a week, more than $4 a month. It was not a fortune, but it was something. Yes, she heard herself say. Yes, I would be interested. Wonderful. Can you start next week? I will have the first loads ready on Monday if you can pick them up. I will be here. After Margaret left, Russell squeezed her hand. See? Things have a way of working out. But they still needed $15 by the end of the week, and taking in laundry was not going to solve that immediate problem. They finished their shopping and headed back toward the wagon. Delilah was so lost in thought, trying to figure out where they could get the money, that she almost walked past the notice board outside the sheriff's office. Russell was the one who stopped, his attention caught by something. Delilah, look at this! She turned back and saw what he was looking at, a wanted poster for a horse thief named Jack Morrison. The reward was $50. $50, she breathed. That would be more than enough. It would. Russell was studying the poster intently. It says he was last seen in the area, stealing horses from ranches south of here. The description matches a man I saw a couple days ago near your property line. I thought he was just a drifter, but if it is him... We should tell the sheriff, Delilah said. But when they went inside, the sheriff, a heavy man with a magnificent mustache and a generally bored expression, was not encouraging. Jack Morrison? Sure, I know about him. Been chasing him for weeks with no luck. If you saw someone who might be him, that is interesting, but not enough for a reward. You have to actually catch him. What if we could find him? Russell asked. Or what if we could lead you to him? The sheriff looked skeptical. You are a rancher, son, not a lawman. Best leave this to the professionals. With all due respect, Sheriff, the professionals have not caught him yet. Russell's voice was polite but firm. If Miss Emerson saw him near her property, that means he is likely camping somewhere in that area. I know the land. I could track him. And get yourself killed in the process. Morrison is dangerous. He is already wanted for murder in Nevada. The sheriff leaned back in his chair. I appreciate the offer, but I cannot have civilians putting themselves at risk. Outside the sheriff's office, Delilah turned to Russell. You are not seriously considering going after this man, are you? I am considering that we need $15 and the reward is $50. I am considering that I saw someone matching that description and I know approximately where he was. I am considering that if we wait for the sheriff to handle it, you will lose your ranch. Russell, no, it is too dangerous. He is a murderer. He is one man, and I have tracked plenty of men in my time. I know what I'm doing. He took her hands. I am not going to let you lose your home, Delilah. Not when there is something I can do about it. I cannot lose you, she said fiercely. The ranch does not matter if you are not here. His expression softened. You are not going to lose me, I promise. But I need to do this. For us. For our future. She wanted to argue more, but she could see the determination in his eyes. He had made up his mind, and nothing she said was going to change it. "Then I am coming with you," she said. "Absolutely not. You cannot stop me. It is my land. And if this man is camping there, I have every right to help find him. Besides, you said yourself 2 people are better than 1. They argued about it the whole way back to the ranch, but in the end, Russell knew she was right. They would do this together, just like everything else. They spent the rest of that day preparing. Russell checked his weapons carefully, making sure his rifle was clean and his revolver was loaded. Delilah had her father's old revolver, and though she was not a great shot with it, she knew enough to be useful. They set out before dawn the next morning, riding double on Russell's paint horse. He took her to the area where he had seen the suspicious man, and there he dismounted and began to search for signs. It did not take long to find tracks of a single horse, recently shod, moving north into the hills. They followed the trail for hours as the sun climbed higher and the heat became oppressive. Delilah was grateful for the hat Russell insisted she wear and for the canteen of water they had brought. Several times they lost the trail and had to backtrack, but Russell always found it again, reading the land with an expertise that amazed her. Finally, as the sun was beginning to sink toward the western horizon, they spotted smoke rising from a small canyon ahead. Russell signaled for silence, and they dismounted, moving forward on foot. The camp was small and poorly hidden a man who was confident he was not being pursued, or simply careless. They could see a single figure sitting by the fire, and even from a distance Delilah could tell it matched the description on the wanted poster. Average height, dark hair, wearing a distinctive gray duster. Russell motioned for her to stay back while he approached. She wanted to argue, but she knew this was not the time. So she crouched behind a boulder, her hand on her father's revolver, and watched as Russell moved silently down into the canyon. He got within 20 feet before the man heard something and spun around, his hand going for his gun. But Russell was faster. His revolver was already drawn and aimed. "Do not," Russell said calmly. "I will shoot you where you stand if you touch that gun." The man froze, his hand hovering near his weapon. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who is taking you in for the bounty. Now, real slow, use your left hand to take that gun out and toss it away." For a moment, Delilah thought the man was going to go for it anyway, was going to try his luck against Russell's aim, but something in Russell's eyes must have convinced him otherwise. Slowly, carefully, he removed his gun and tossed it aside. "That is smart," Russell said. "Now get on the ground, hands behind your back." "You're making a mistake, friend. I have not done anything wrong." "Then you will have a chance to explain that to the sheriff. Down on the ground, now." The man complied, and Russell moved forward to tie his hands with rope he had brought for just this purpose. It was only then that Delilah emerged from her hiding place, her own gun drawn. "Well, well," the man said, catching sight of her. "A woman. This just gets better and better." "Shut up," Russell said pleasantly, pulling the rope tight. "You are Jack Morrison, wanted for horse theft and murder in 3 territories. You will be real quiet on the ride back to Hangtown, or I will make you quiet, understood?" Morrison said nothing, but the hatred in his eyes was clear. They made him walk while Russell led his horse and Delilah rode behind them, her gun trained on Morrison's back. It was a long, uncomfortable journey back to town, made longer by the fact that they did not dare stop for more than a few minutes at a time. Morrison tried several times to engage them in conversation, alternating between claiming he was innocent and trying to bribe them to let him go. They ignored him. It was well past midnight when they finally rode into Hangtown and pounded on the door of the sheriff's office. The sheriff answered in his nightshirt, looking annoyed until he saw Morrison. "I will be damned," he said. "You actually caught him." "We did," Russell said. "And I believe there is a reward." The sheriff took custody of Morrison, locking him in one of the cells in the back of the office. Then he opened his safe and counted out $50 in gold coins. "This is irregular," he grumbled. "Usually we need more verification before paying out rewards, but I know this man by sight, and there is no doubt this is Jack Morrison. You folks did good work." Delilah accepted the money with shaking hands. $50. It was more money than she had seen in one place since her father died. Combined with what they had already saved, they now had more than enough to pay the taxes with some left over. "Thank you, Sheriff," she said. "Thank your friend here. That was some fine tracking." The sheriff looked at Russell with new respect. "You ever thought about working in law enforcement? We could use a man with your skills." "I appreciate the offer, but I am happy where I am." Russell put his arm around Delilah's shoulders, and she leaned into him gratefully. They spent what was left of the night at the hotel, too exhausted to ride back to the ranch. The proprietor raised an eyebrow at them sharing a room, but they were too tired to care about propriety. Russell slept on the floor despite Delilah's protests, and she lay in the narrow bed listening to his breathing and thinking about how close they had come to disaster. But they had made it. They had won. Tomorrow they would pay the taxes, and the ranch would be safe. In the morning they went straight to the county office and paid the full amount owed. The clerk stamped the receipt with official finality, and Delilah felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she had been carrying for years. "Thank you," she said to Russell as they walked out into the morning sunlight, "for everything. I could not have done this without you." "Yes, you could have, but I'm glad you did not have to." He took her hand, right there in the middle of town where anyone could see. "You know what this means, do not you? We won. The ranch is safe. Sutton cannot touch you now." She laughed, feeling almost giddy with relief. "I know. I can barely believe it." "Believe it. You did it, Delilah. You saved your parents' legacy." "We did it," she corrected. "This was not just me. This was us." Something changed in his expression, became more serious. "About that. About us. Now that things are settled and you are not in immediate danger of losing everything, I want to ask you something." Her heart started to pound. "What?" He took both of her hands in his right there on the street and looked into her eyes. "I know we have not known each other long, just a couple of months, and I know I do not have much to offer you except hard work and a promise to always do my best. But I love you, Delilah. I have loved you from the moment I saw you. And I do not want to be just your hired hand anymore. I want to be your partner, your husband, if you will have me." She could hardly breathe. "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I am asking you to marry me. Right now it is not very romantic, standing here in the street covered in dust after chasing down a criminal. But I cannot wait any longer. I need you to know how I feel. I need to know if you feel the same way." "Yes." The word burst out of her, loud enough that several passers-by turned to look. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you too, Russell. I have been so afraid to say it, afraid you would leave, but I love you so much it scares me." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her there in the middle of town. And she did not care who saw or what they thought. When they finally broke apart, they were both grinning like fools. "We should do this properly," Russell said. "I should buy you a ring." "I do not need a ring. I just need you." "You are getting a ring anyway. And a proper wedding if you want one." She thought about it. A big wedding would cost money they did not have, and besides, her parents were gone. There was no one to invite except a few neighbors and acquaintances. "What if we just had the minister marry us quietly, just the two of us, and whatever witnesses we need? We can use the money we saved for something more practical, like improving the ranch?" Russell smiled. "That sounds perfect. When?" "Today." She felt bold and reckless and happier than she had been in years. "Why wait?" "Today," he agreed. "Let us go find the minister." The minister was a kindly old man named Reverend Applegate, who had baptized Delilah as a baby. He was surprised by their request, but willing to accommodate them. They found two witnesses, the clerk from the general store and Margaret Chen, who happened to be there shopping and was delighted to be part of the wedding. They stood in the small church with the afternoon sun streaming through the windows, and Delilah wore her best dress, the blue calico that had been her mother's. Russell had cleaned up and shaved, and he looked so handsome it made her chest ache. The ceremony was short and simple. They exchanged vows that were as old as time, promising to love and honor and cherish. Russell had found a simple gold band at the jeweler's, and it fit her finger perfectly. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Russell kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. Afterwards, Margaret insisted on treating them to dinner at the hotel restaurant, and they sat and ate and talked about the future. It all felt surreal, like something that was happening to someone else. Just that morning she had been Delilah Emerson, alone and struggling. Now she was Delilah Ridley, married to the man she loved with a future that suddenly seemed full of hope. They rode back to the ranch in the evening as the sun was painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. When they reached the house, Russell swept her up in his arms and carried her over the threshold, and she laughed with pure joy. "Welcome home, Mrs. Ridley," he said, setting her down gently. "It was already my home, but now it is ours. That makes it better." That night, they truly became husband and wife in the bed that had been her parents'. It was sweet and gentle and a little awkward, as first times often are, but it was perfect because they loved each other, and that made everything else unimportant. Afterwards, she lay in his arms listening to his heartbeat and feeling more content than she had ever thought possible. "I was so alone for so long," she whispered in the darkness. "I had forgotten what it felt like to have someone." "You will never be alone again," he promised, his arms tightening around her. "I am here now, and I am not going anywhere." The weeks that followed were the happiest of Delilah's life. She and Russell fell into a new rhythm, working the ranch together as true partners. They made plans for the future, expanding the flock, maybe getting some cattle, planting a bigger garden. The work was still hard, but with two of them sharing the load, it felt manageable. The laundry work from Margaret's family provided steady extra income, and Delilah found she did not mind the labor. It was satisfying to see the piles of clean linens, to know she was earning money that would help secure their future. Ed Sutton rode by once more, about a month after their wedding. He stopped at the property line, looking at the two of them working together in the garden, at the obvious signs of improvement around the place. His face darkened, but he said nothing. He just turned his horse and rode away, and they never saw him again. "He knows he has lost," Russell said, watching the man disappear. "He cannot intimidate us, and he cannot buy us out. We won." Delilah leaned against her husband, feeling safe and happy and home. "We did. We really did." Summer turned to fall, and the lambs were finally ready to sell. They took them to market in Sacramento and got an even better price than Delilah had hoped, $60 for the lot. Combined with their savings and the money from the laundry work, they finally had a cushion, a bit of security against future troubles. In October, Delilah realized she was pregnant. She told Russell one evening after dinner, nervous about how he would react. They had talked about children, but always as something far in the future, something to plan for eventually. But his face lit up with such joy that her nervousness evaporated. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. I missed my monthly time twice now, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings. Mrs. Johnson down the valley says those are sure signs," and she bit her lip. "I know it is sooner than we planned, but nothing. This is wonderful news. We are going to have a baby." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "I am going to be a father. I can hardly believe it." "You are happy?" Happy does not even begin to cover it. He pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. "You have given me everything, Delilah, a home, a purpose, a future, and now a child. I do not know what I did to deserve all of this, but I swear I will spend every day of my life trying to be worthy of it." "You already are," she said softly. "You have always been worthy." The pregnancy was not easy. She was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep food down. Russell fussed over her constantly, doing extra work so she could rest, bringing her weak tea and toast when that was all she could stomach. She felt guilty about not being able to pull her weight, but he would not hear of it. "You are growing our child," he said. "That is the most important work there is. Everything else can wait." By winter, the sickness had passed, and she felt better, though she was starting to show now. Russell was almost comically protective, insisting she not lift anything heavy or work outside when it was cold. She bore his hovering with good humor, touched by how much he cared. Christmas was a quiet affair, just the two of them in the house with a small tree that Russell had cut from the hills. They exchanged simple gifts. She made him a new shirt, and he carved her a beautiful jewelry box from pine. They cooked a goose that she had been fattening up for weeks, and they talked about the baby, about what they would name him or her, about what kind of parents they wanted to be. "I want our children to know they are loved," Delilah said, her hand resting on her growing belly. "I want them to never doubt that they matter, that they are wanted." "They will know," Russell promised. "We will tell them and show them every single day." In March, when the wildflowers were just beginning to bloom across the hills, Delilah went into labor. It was long and difficult, lasting through a whole night and into the next day. Russell stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, bringing her water, talking her through the pain. Mrs. Johnson, who had delivered most of the babies in the valley, came to help, her capable hands and calm voice a comfort. Finally, just as the sun was setting on the second day, the baby came. A boy, healthy and perfect, with dark hair like his father and lungs that announced his arrival to the entire county. "You have a son," Mrs. Johnson said, placing the squalling infant in Delilah's arms. She looked down at the tiny face, at the little hands waving in the air, and felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We have been waiting for you." Russell sat on the edge of the bed, his eyes shining with tears as he looked at his son. "He is perfect. You are perfect. I love you both so much." "What should we name him?" Delilah asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never quite settled on one. Now, holding their son, one name seemed to rise above all the others. "James," Russell said, "after your father, if that is all right with you." She felt tears spill down her cheeks. "James, yes, James Russell Ridley. It is perfect." Little James was a good baby, healthy and strong. He nursed well and slept in reasonable stretches, and Delilah marveled every day at the miracle of him. Russell was a devoted father, walking the floor with James when he was fussy, changing his diapers without complaint, singing to him in his rumbling voice. The ranch continued to prosper. That spring they expanded the flock, buying 10 more ewes with the money they had saved. Russell built a bigger pen and reinforced the barn. The vegetables in the garden flourished, and Delilah sold the excess at the market in town, bringing in more income. When James was 6 months old, Delilah discovered she was pregnant again. She had not expected it to happen so quickly, but Russell was thrilled. "Another one already. We are going to have a house full of children at this rate." "Are you complaining?" she teased. "Not even a little bit." He kissed her soundly. "I love our life, Delilah. I love you and James, and this little one on the way. I love this ranch and the work we do together. I have everything I ever wanted." "Me too," she agreed. "Sometimes I think about that morning when the mountain lion came, when you shot it before it could kill my lambs. If you had ridden past, if you had not stopped to help. But I did stop. I was meant to stop. I was meant to find you." He pulled her close, careful of her belly. "We were meant to be together. I believe that." "So do I." Their second child, a daughter they named Rose Emerson Ridley, was born in the winter of 1875. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's amber eyes, and from the moment she was born she had her father wrapped around her little finger. The years passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. James grew into a sturdy little boy who loved helping his father with the animals. Rose was quieter, more thoughtful, content to sit and watch the world around her with those solemn eyes. They added cattle to their holdings, then more sheep. The ranch grew and prospered. They hired occasional help during busy seasons, but mostly they managed on their own, with James helping as soon as he was old enough to be useful. In 1878, Delilah gave birth to their third child, another son they named Daniel. And 3 years later, a fourth child, a daughter they called Clara. Their house, which had seemed so empty when Delilah lived there alone, was now full of noise and laughter and life. Ed Sutton died in 1880, kicked in the head by one of his own horses. Delilah felt no satisfaction at the news, just a vague relief that the threat he had represented was finally permanently gone. His ranch was divided up among his children, who had no interest in bothering their neighbors. As the children grew, Russell and Delilah told them stories about how they had met, about the mountain lion and the bounty hunter and the struggle to save the ranch. The children never tired of hearing about it, begging for the story over and over. "Tell us about when Papa shot the mountain lion," James would plead. "Tell us about when you caught the bad man," Rose would add. And they would tell the stories, embellishing them slightly with each telling until they took on the quality of legend. But the core remained true: two people, alone and struggling, who found each other and built something beautiful together. The ranch continued to grow. By 1885, they had over 100 head of sheep and 20 head of cattle. They employed 2 full-time ranch hands and occasional day laborers. The house had been expanded twice, with additional bedrooms for the children and a proper parlor for receiving guests. Delilah still did laundry for the Chen family. Though now it was more out of friendship than necessity, she and Margaret had remained close, and their children played together whenever they came to town. Russell developed a reputation as one of the best stockmen in the county. Other ranchers came to him for advice, and he was always generous with his knowledge. He served on the local council for a time, helping to make decisions about roads and water rights and other matters that affected the community, but his favorite times were still the evenings at home, sitting on the porch with Delilah while the children played in the yard, watching the sun set over the hills that had become so dear to them both. "Do you ever regret it?" Delilah asked him one such evening. They were celebrating their 15th wedding anniversary, and the children had been sent to bed so the adults could have some quiet time. Settling down here, giving up the drifter's life? Russell looked at her like she had grown a second head. "Regret? This is the best thing that ever happened to me. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. I just mean you had seen so much of the world, and now you are stuck here on one small ranch." "I am not stuck anywhere. I chose this. I choose it every single day." He took her hand, his thumb rubbing over the simple gold band she still wore. "Before I met you, I was just surviving, moving from place to place, never belonging anywhere. But you gave me a home, a family, a reason to wake up every morning and be grateful. How could I possibly regret that?" She leaned her head on his shoulder, content. "I am glad, because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. You will never have to. I am yours for the rest of my days." Delilah Ridley, that is a promise. James, their eldest, grew up to be a fine young man, serious and hardworking like his father. At 18, he announced his intention to stay on the ranch and help run it, and both Russell and Delilah were quietly thrilled. It meant the legacy they had built would continue, would be passed down to the next generation. Rose discovered a talent for healing and went to San Francisco to study nursing, something that filled her parents with equal parts pride and worry. But she came back after 2 years with a degree and a determination to serve the community, setting up a small clinic in Hangtown. Daniel inherited his father's way with animals and his mother's head for business. By the time he was 20, he was talking about starting his own ranch, and Russell helped him find a good piece of land nearby. Clara, the baby, surprised them all by declaring her intention to become a teacher. She went east for her education, something that broke Delilah's heart even as she supported her daughter's dreams. But Clara came back too, eventually, bringing with her a husband and a determination to improve the local school. Russell and Delilah grew older together, their hair turning gray, their hands growing more gnarled with age, but they still worked the ranch, still rose with the sun and fell into bed exhausted at night. The work was in their bones, part of who they were. On their 25th wedding anniversary, the children threw them a party. It seemed like half the county showed up, cramming into the house and spilling out into the yard. There was food and music and dancing, and Delilah found herself overwhelmed by it all. "Look what we built," Russell said, standing beside her and surveying the crowd. "All these people, all these lives we have touched. It is pretty amazing when you think about it." "It is," she agreed, "and it all started with a mountain lion." He laughed at that. "Best mountain lion that ever lived then, because without it, I would have ridden right past your ranch that morning, and we would have missed all of this." She turned to look at him, this man who had saved her in more ways than one. His face was weathered now, marked by years of sun and wind, but to her he was still the handsome cowboy who had come riding out of the dawn with his rifle raised. "I love you," she said. "I have loved you since that first day, and I will love you until my last day. And I love you, always have, always will." He pulled her into his arms, right there in the middle of their anniversary party, and kissed her with all the passion of their youth. The crowd cheered and whistled, but they ignored it, lost in each other the way they had been for 25 years. They had many more good years together. They saw all their children married, saw grandchildren born. The ranch continued to prosper under James's management, and Russell gradually stepped back from the day-to-day work, content to advise and help when needed. In 1905, when Russell was 60 and Delilah was 54, they decided to take a trip, something they had never done in all their years together. James insisted he could manage the ranch, and the grandchildren were old enough to help. They went to San Francisco, marveling at the changes in the city. They rode the cable cars and walked through Golden Gate Park and stayed in a fancy hotel that seemed impossibly luxurious after years of ranch life. They held hands like young lovers and talked about the past and the future and all the moments in between. "I feel like I am courting you all over again," Russell said one evening as they watched the sun set over the ocean. "Then court away," Delilah said with a laugh. "I'm certainly not going to complain." On their last night in the city, they had dinner at a fine restaurant, the kind of place they would never have imagined being able to afford back in the early days. As they ate, Delilah looked across the table at her husband and felt such a surge of love and gratitude that it nearly overwhelmed her. "Thank you," she said suddenly. "For what?" "For everything. For stopping that morning when you saw the mountain lion. For taking a chance on a struggling rancher who could barely pay you. For loving me when I was too scared to admit I loved you. For building this life with me. For all of it." Russell reached across the table and took her hand. "You do not need to thank me. It has been my honor and privilege to love you, Delilah. Every single day with you has been a gift." They returned to the ranch refreshed and happy, ready to enjoy their later years surrounded by family. Russell's health began to fail slowly in his mid-60s. Nothing dramatic, just the accumulation of a lifetime of hard work. He developed a cough that would not go away, and his joints ached on cold mornings. But he never complained, just adjusted and kept going. Delilah stayed healthy and active well into her 60s, still tending her garden, still helping with the grandchildren. She watched Russell slow down with concern, but she knew better than to fuss. He was a proud man, and he would accept help only when absolutely necessary. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1923, surrounded by 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren. It was a huge gathering, 3 generations of the family they had built together. Looking around at all those faces, Delilah marveled at what had come from that one morning in 1873 when a cowboy had shot a mountain lion. "We did good," Russell whispered to her as they cut the cake. "We did better than good," she corrected. "We did amazing." He passed away peacefully in his sleep on a cold January night in 1926, just shy of his 81st birthday. Delilah woke to find him beside her, looking peaceful, finally free of the pain that had plagued him in his final years. She held his hand and cried, mourning the loss of her partner, her love, the other half of her soul. But even through her grief, she felt grateful. They had been given 52 years together, far more than many couples received. They had built something beautiful, something lasting. Their love had created ripples that would extend far beyond their own lives, touching generations to come. She lived another 5 years after Russell's death, staying on the ranch that had been the center of her world for so long. Her children visited often, bringing the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She told them stories about their grandfather, about the cowboy who had come riding out of nowhere and changed everything. He was the best man I ever knew, she would say, and I was the luckiest woman in the world that he chose me. On a warm June morning in 1931, Delilah Emerson Ridley passed away in her sleep at the age of 80. She was laid to rest beside Russell in the small cemetery outside Hangtown, their graves side by side just as they had slept side by side for over 50 years. On her gravestone, her children had inscribed a simple message: "Beloved wife, mother, and friend, she built a legacy of love." And they had. Together, she and Russell had taken a hard-scrabble piece of land and turned it into a thriving ranch. They had raised 4 children who went on to have families of their own. They had helped build a community and touched countless lives with their kindness and generosity. But most importantly, they had loved each other fiercely and faithfully through good times and bad, through struggles and triumphs. Their love story began with a mountain lion and a cowboy's perfect shot, but it became something far greater, a testament to what 2 people could build when they chose to face the world together. The ranch stayed in the family for generations, passing from James to his children and then to theirs. And every generation heard the story of how it all began. Of the morning when Delilah Emerson was defending her livestock against a mountain lion, and cowboy Russell Ridley shot it before it could strike, changing both their lives forever. It was a story of courage and chance, of struggle and survival, but most of all, it was a story of love. The kind of love that builds legacies, the kind of love that lasts not just a lifetime, but for all the lifetimes that follow. And on quiet evenings, when the sun sets over the California hills and paints the sky in shades of gold, the descendants of Delilah and Russell sometimes stand on the porch of that old ranch house and think about their great-great-grandparents. They think about a woman brave enough to face down a mountain lion with nothing but a faulty rifle and the determination to protect what was hers. They think about a cowboy who stopped to help when he could have just ridden on by. And they are grateful because that one moment of bravery and kindness created everything that came after. It created families and futures and love that would echo through generations. It proved that sometimes the smallest choices to stop, to help, to take a chance on someone can change everything. That was the real legacy of Delilah and Russell Ridley. Not the ranch or the money or the land, though those things mattered, but the proof that love, true love, the kind that sees you through mountain lions and bounty hunters and back taxes and all the struggles that life can throw at you, that love is worth everything. That love is what lasts. That love is what matters most in the end. And so their story lived on, told and retold, changing slightly with each telling, but never losing its essential truth. It lived on in the land they had worked so hard to keep. It lived on in the descendants who bore their names and their features. It lived on in the hearts of everyone who heard it and thought, yes, that is what love should look like. That is what matters. The mountain lion had been trying to survive, to feed itself in a harsh and unforgiving world. The cowboy had been looking for work, for a place to belong. The woman had been trying to hold on to the last piece of her parents' legacy, and somehow, impossibly, all those needs and wants and desperate hopes had collided in one perfect moment that morning in June. A shot rang out. A life was saved. And 2 hearts that had been wandering alone found their home in each other. That was how it began, and how it continued day after day, year after year, through all the joys and sorrows that make up a life well lived. In the end, that is all any of us can hope for, to find someone who will stand beside us when the mountain lions come, to build something that lasts beyond ourselves, to love and be loved in return. Delilah and Russell found all of that and more. They found forever, and forever it turned out was more than enough.